Good morning, first graders. I think it's Wednesday when you will be reading this, but if not, happy any day. In the mornings, I like to get up and go on a run in the morning. And after reading our story of the week about trees, I really loved to learn some different types of trees and to notice those around. Have you looked around your neighborhood as you're walking around or looking out your window to see what kind of trees that you have in your yard or your neighbor's yard or around your house? I loved how this story started out and told us some different types of trees. There was maple, and then there was lots of other ones too. But really, my favorite tree is the dogwood tree. And in my neighborhood, there are lots of dogwood trees. And if you look over in a tab, Miss Krill later, I think last week, she told us a little bit about the lesson of the dogwood trees. So I hope you specifically remember that. But our story talked a lot about apple trees. And I wanted us to talk about sequencing. So when you read this story, it told us some things in a certain order. So about our apple tree, what was the order that it talked about how it grew? Think about it. What did it start with? It started with a seed. And they planted it, and it shows us how that tree grew. And since this is informational text, it showed us how it was planted, it turned into a sprout, it turned into a tree with blooms. Bees came, and they turned into apples, and they were ready to eat the apples. So I feel like that was the first part of the story, and it talked about how an apple tree grew. Next, it told us about different parts of the tree and talked about the roots. It talked about the trunk. And did you notice last week we learned about figurative language, and it talked about how you were as tall as something, how you were loud as something, how you were as quiet as something. Well, in this story, there was a part of figurative speech, and I want to see if you noticed where it was. I'll try and scooch over to the page that it was on. Oh, it was further back. Well, it talked about how the bark was like a coat. Here it is. You can see the bark of a tree. A bark covers the branches and trunk like a coat. What do you think that means? Do you see and notice that part of figurative speech? Does a tree wear a coat? No. But it talks about that because that's something easy for us to think about. The bark covers the tree like a coat. So I hope you noticed that part of figurative speech. So next, the book talked about how trees grew, it then talked about different parts of the tree, and last, it talked about the seasons. So those are kind of the way, at first, it talked about how trees grew. Second, it talked about different parts of the tree. Last, it talked about different seasons and things that trees grow from. So when you sequence, it talks about first, next, and last. So right now, I want you to think about, after you read this story, think about the parts of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And let's sequence those together. What would you do first if you were making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and you had to do it all by yourself? What would you do first? What would you get? I would get the bread. So you'd get how many pieces? You'd get 2 pieces of bread. Then what? Then you would put on the peanut butter and the jelly. And last, you would put them together and take a big bite. Think about sequencing today, and I would like for you to tell someone how to sequence your peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, we did that one together, but have some practice telling people things in order. Maybe you can think of something fun that you can put in order too.